welcome to episode 62 of our SAP on Azure Video Podcast. Today is October 7th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So before we start, I just learned that it's Goran's birthday today. So happy birthday, Goran.
Thank you.
That's a commitment to join the podcast even on your birthday. So
you see
thank you very much.
You see it, what a sacrifice.
Dedication.
Yes.
Yes. But so it's not only Goran's birthday, but we also have another great event, and Nick is here. Nick Morgan is here with us today, and he will talk about capacity reservations for virtual machines, something that we talked about in one of our previous calls very briefly, but I have to admit that I don't fully understand the details of it. So I'm really happy that Nick is here with us, and we already talked a little about what's going on or what's happening, and I'm sure Nick can provide us with some fantastic insights. But as always, before we go to Nick, let's quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. And I actually want to start. I guess well, I upgraded my PC in the meantime to Windows 11. I'm sure a lot of others have as well done this to experience the new beautiful design and stuff like that. But there's actually another nice thing, and that's Power Automate Desktop. That's now by default part of Windows 11. So if you have Windows 11, then you can use Power Automate Desktop to automate certain steps on your PC, whether you want to automate an Excel or something that you do in Outlook. And obviously this Power Automate Desktop fits into the whole Power Platform. So potentially you can now also automate your SAP GUI and have some SAP interactions and connect to other services. So yeah, with this Power Automate Desktop part of Windows 11, I hope we'll see more and more of these RPA automation flows also with our customers. Then the next thing is a blog post by Naeem Mascout. That was probably not pronounced correctly, but he talks about a white paper for the SAP Landscape Manager with Microsoft Azure. So again, many episodes ago, we had Steffen Müller also joining our podcast, where he talked about the work that he's doing together with SAP on the Landscape Manager, obviously in the context of Microsoft Azure. And now this white paper talks about a lot of different functionalities that the Microsoft Azure connector or the Azure Cloud Manager has or provides as functionalities for LaMa. And you can see it's a long list of features and functionalities, starting from a simple start and stop to really system copies and system refreshes and stuff like that. So I think if you're using LaMa, if you're running SAP on Azure, then that's definitely also something to check out.
So, you must always be careful. LaMa is actually landscape management, not manager. Yeah. So it's cloud means manager, but LaMa is landscape management.
Yeah. There is only one manager, and that's the solution manager.
Exactly. You see? You see that we are coming from SAP.
Very icy ground. You have to be careful, where you step.
Especially with Robert. I think, Robert, you also worked on the Landscape Manager team, right? Back at SAP. Cool. Good. So if you want to check out the SAP Landscape Management tool, then give it a try and test it together with your SAP systems running on Azure. The next thing, Martin Pankratz, we talked about him several times. We had him on the show to talk about the private link scenario. And obviously with using private links, there are sometimes also some issues, and you need to debug and test the scenario. And in this blog post, you can really see he's really working on this, and we are working on different scenarios there. And in this blog post, he outlines how you can actually troubleshoot, debug a private link setup. So he provides all the commands that you can really connect to the Cloud Foundry system, how you can then walk through the whole process of the data that is sent, basically. So it's a nice blog post that outlines yeah, if you are using private link already, what you need to do to actually troubleshoot and debug this scenario. Okay, moving on. There were a few, two blog posts actually on the SAP on Azure tech community site. Goran, I think you are the expert on these areas.
Yeah, if you may go a little bit down, there's a picture below that's yeah, here. So yeah, just stay here. So it's really interesting topic here. They talk about the HANA on HLI, HANA large instances across the zones.
Mm-hmm.
Now the point is HANA large instances bare metal. Today also a new version of HLI run inside of the Azure data center, right? And of course, you can stretch them across HANA, those boxes, physical boxes, also across the zones. Typically, it's used by really very, very huge system, which may maybe not fit the VMs, right? Now, what is basically the rest is run in Azure. The rest of the layer, central services and app service. Now, when you run the rest inside of the zones, meaning in the VMs, that subnet can be stretched across the zones, which means ASCS cluster, whatever is used, will keep the same IP address. That's important. Now, with the HLI, basically HLI inside of the zone will run in the different subnets. And not in the same subnet like on the VM. So that means that when you that virtual resource, the virtual HANA name when run on one VM would be in one subnet, meaning it will have one IP address. This is basically what is mentioning below, you know. And when you fail over, it will have another virtual IP address, right? And basically, this is all described in the document. Let me not go into detail. How will basically that during the failover, that IP address basically through the dynamic DNS will be updated. So yeah, so something like this. There's also similar, I mean, some kind of way on the Windows clustering. If you have a cluster stretch across the different subnets, right? So yeah, that's the whole point, and it goes very in detail. And definitely, when you see from on the top, there is a list of all people who are working, and obviously there were also close collaboration between not just the Microsoft guy, but also the SUSE guy. So the Fabian, and they are the lead there in the SAP HA in the Linux lab in the SAP from a partner side. Yeah. So I mean, very good. I mean, useful. Blog or kind of documentation as well in some way for the guys who would go HANA HLI across the zones.
Yeah, right. I can see it's a very long blog post. So
it's a kind of documentation. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. Configure dynamic DNS. Yeah. So
probably docs.microsoft.com at some point.
I think it should land there sooner or later. I guess block is, I suppose, was faster to get it up and running than the documentation. Yeah. And basically the another one, it's also very kind of important, central services on Windows using the Azure file for SMB. So what does it mean? Basically, central services Windows cluster, it's very popular solution. You have two variants, one with a shared disk, one with the file share. File share, it's important, it's run from 749 kernel, meaning a little bit higher system, share disk with the old. Now, why the file share is kind of currently, it is available in the different variants. You know, in the past, one was a scale-out file server, which includes multiple VMs, which you need to manage it. It's not so ideal. Another option with the file share is use Azure NetApp files, which is a much better. I mean, it's better in the sense that it's a cloud service. There is no management there. Of course, it's much ideal. Azure file is basically the same stuff, just from the pure Microsoft. It's also cloud service. Now, there is one important feature, key feature, that Azure file can be either a local redundant storage, meaning you can use with the availability set context. And what is really crucial here, I would say, it's also a zonal redundant file share, meaning you can use this for the zonal high availability. And that's a key. I mean, that's a key of this of Azure File for SMB that you can use across the zone. So you can use a zonal for the zonal high availability or improve high availability across the data center, so to say.
And that part we will have also for Linux, currently in preview, but not with SMB. With
exactly,
NFS.
Within NFS. So Ralitza also wrote a blog about using basically Azure File for the NFS, for the Linux in the Pacemaker Cluster context, and describe how to do it. This is still not yet released, but basically it's the same context, same concept. On a Linux, basically they always have a kind of file share approach, so to say. Okay, that's a kind of, but it's you're right, Robert. It's the same idea behind. Azure Files here is okay. On Windows is SMB protocol, on Linux is NFS. So Cameron Gartner, he's really the veteran in the SAP and Microsoft space. He was working a lot on this topic. SAP Inst was also updated to support this kind of configuration as well. There was a lot of work there. Maybe a bit kind of, he has just mentioned logistically, it's a bit additional work you need for the with the Azure File for SMB. You need also Azure Active Directory integration with the Active Directory. So it's a little bit more logistically takes some work there, but generally otherwise it's a good an option for the zonal HA. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Then we have one last thing, understanding Azure NetApp files backup. Robert?
So, okay, I mean, there's one more important part regarding NetApp, as you probably know that if you want to use Azure NetApp files, you need to register it. You need to register your subscription to if you want to use it. Now, this is removed from requirements. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. There's announcement for that, and there's separate announcement. I didn't find the blog or announcement. And this is another part which is showing how we are actually really going aggressively in this managed service for NetApp or Azure NetApp. Yeah, and we now have the backup option. So this, of course, Azure have natively these snapshots. But of course, we want to have a classical backup of those files which are hosted, let's say, on the NetApp volumes. And then that we have a policy that we decide, okay, how we want to approach that. And actually, we can back up that directly to Azure Blob Storage. So there's to somehow move the loads of the backup from the Azure NetApp to the Blob Storage, which is cheaper. Yeah. And of course, very important for most of the customer from compliances reason also that we have the different policy that we support in different policy to be able actually to backup files which are, let's say, hosted on a NetApp. Yeah? I think it's very, very, very good, very important feature. And now we have really additional, very nice feature in our Azure NetApp files service.
Great. Cool. I didn't know that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, good. With this, I think we're through with the news, and with that, Nick, over to you. Maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, and then, I'm really looking forward to learn more about capacity reservation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so my name's Nick Morgan. I'm an SAP Azure technical specialist. I actually joined in 2017, near enough the same time as Holger.
Yeah,
I'm probably Robert. In fact, I think we all came in about the same time. So
great guys always come together.
Absolutely. And so we're the kind of veterans of this space. And in fact, last year, was it last year? God, I forget now. No, it was the year before. Me and a colleague, Bartosz Drzakowski, we wrote the book, SAP on Azure Implementation Guide, available from all good bookstores, including Amazon, or as a free download if you can find it on the Microsoft website.
Cool. So we'll put a link there as well. Yes.
Yeah, if you could put a link to the Amazon bit, not the free download.
Of course. Of course.
I'm still trying to earn some royalties on that. So I've got a couple of slides to explain a bit about capacity reservations, but just to set a bit of background to this, in I think it was early 2019, I was sitting in a meeting with a customer, and we were talking about things like using Azure Site Recovery for disaster recovery with SAP. And the customer said, "This is great, but do you actually guarantee that the capacity will be available? If Europe West has just gone down completely, there's going to be a lot of people trying to bring up workloads in Europe North. Do you," and the word is very clear, "guarantee the capacity?" And I said, "Good question. I'll go and find the answer to that one." And the answer was kind of yes and no. So we do, within our capacity planning, we do understand, because we know what VMs exist. We know which ones have Azure Site Recovery applied to them, and we do try and make some allowance. But actually, if you think about it logically, if I'm paying for a virtual machine in Europe West, how is it economically viable for Microsoft to give you, free of charge, a reservation on a capacity in Europe North, just in case you need it in a disaster? And it doesn't kind of make sense that we could realistically do that, because in the worst case, if every VM in Europe West, somebody decided to switch ASR on, the whole of Europe North would just be there not being paid for.
So basically the problematic is we give them with ASR functionality to do a disaster recovery and basically to improve their business continuity. They can do a DR failover, but it might happen that they can't start the VM because there is no enough capacity.
That's the problem. And the more specialized the virtual machine becomes, the higher the risk that is an issue. Because arguably, if you're talking about small D and E series virtual machines, you might have to do some manual intervention, but you could turn a DAV4 into a DDV4 into a DV3, or something about the same size and roughly the same SAPs and memory. You might be able to find the capacity. But if you've got something like an M series, there's probably nowhere to go. You probably want.
I think additional confusion is with reserved instances, because people think, okay, now I'm taking reserved instances, so I'm reserving that. So reserved instances is more commitment. So where customers say, hey, yes, Microsoft, I guarantee that I will use those machines in the next 3 years or 1 year, and then Microsoft will give discount. But sometimes people say, okay, if I'm applying that reserved instances, Microsoft guarantee that instances are reserved or capacity is reserved, which is not the case. Because reserved instances also, which is very important, because when you have a pay-as-you-go in reserved instances, actually the reserved instances are actually prioritized in front of pay-as-you-go in this game, who will get capacity. So when you have reserved instances, Azure will actually prioritize your reservation in front of pay-as-you-go. So this is also a little bit different, but still there's no guarantee for reservation on the other side in DR scenarios.
Exactly. So if it's okay, can I just share a few slides?
Yeah, please.
Sure, go on.
The lucky PowerPoint Live will do what it's supposed to do, or maybe not. So just on that point, and I don't know if we share the slides afterwards, but those are links at the top there to reserved instance. So as Robert just said, reserved instance is really a financial construct. It's about a customer committing to a particular VM series and a certain quantity of virtual CPU within that series for either 1 or 3 years, and on the back of that receiving a significant discount on the price. As soon as you apply a reserved instance, you start paying, whether you're running any virtual machines or not. And within the sort of back end of Azure, as soon as you start up any virtual machine, one of the things that Azure does is it looks to see, does this customer have any reserved instances that can be applied to that VM based on the series it belongs to? And if it does, it will immediately apply that reservation. There's all sorts of complications about scope of reservations and things, so that, are they down to a particular subscription? Are they into a resource group, or are they kind of enterprise agreement wide? And there's lots of reasons why you do different things. But as Robert said, the one thing is it doesn't guarantee the capacity until you started a virtual machine. you've not got the guaranteed capacity. Capacity reservations, they were introduced, I think GA was about sort of 2 months ago. They went into preview earlier in the year. They're a bit more specialized because they actually reserve the capacity. And because of that, you actually have to reserve a specific VM. So I can't just reserve, 16 CPUs worth of DV4 capacity, because our actual backend needs to know, do you want a D16, 2 D8s, 4 D4s? Do you actually have to kind of reserve the size and shape of the virtual machine you want? So it goes beyond the series to the specifics of the VM. A bit like reserved instances, as soon as you apply a capacity reservation, you start paying for it. And the default would be, it's going to be pay as you go, because that's what everything defaults to. But again, just as with reserved instances, as the VM is started, or as the capacity is reserved, our backend will look and say, you've just reserved a D16 V4. Do you have any reserved instances that I can apply to that D16 V4?
Okay.
So, but rather than charge you the full pay-as-you-go rate, I can now charge you the reduced rate, which is your reserved instance rate.
Yeah.
So it will naturally try and consume it, and it will do that automatically. You don't have to do anything to make that happen. The really important thing is that the capacity is now guaranteed. So whether I actually start a virtual machine immediately or not, doesn't matter. The capacity is reserved. I'm paying for it, either pay as you go or on a sort of 1 or 3 year reservation, depending what's available to me. And I can know that whenever I would choose to start that virtual machine, I'm going to get the capacity. We start to look at some kind of real use cases. This, and I'll get my little pointer up. My little pointer, that's great. This is a typical example of how we might do high availability across availability zones in Azure. So I've got my database layer. I've got my active database, and I'm synchronously replicating to my standby database. I've built essential services in the ERS cluster, one VM in each zone. And then in this example, I need 4 application servers in total. And there are a couple of different models you can apply, but one is to say I have 2 active in each zone, and I have another 2 virtual machines, which I've probably got pre-built, so that they're ready to go, but I just shut them down so I'm not paying for them. You could, in fact, automate the process depending on how quickly you want to be able to recover from a zone failure. You wouldn't necessarily have to create them if you built infrastructure as code and configuration as code, so that you can just deploy a VM in 10 minutes. You might just say, I won't even bother to create them. I'll just do it on demand. Doesn't really make a difference. So these in the little blue box, they're deallocated. They're not consuming anything capacity-wise. Therefore, you're not paying for the virtual machine. The problem is, in reality, the availability zone 1 was to go down. Again, how much capacity do we have spare in zone 2? And am I guaranteed to get those virtual machines back? And the answer is no. Yes, if you've got reserved instances spare, you'll be prioritized. And we do things, when we have any form of outage like that, behind the scenes, we do a lot of things to free up capacity. So if you've got a free subscription, or you've got like an MSDN subscriptions, we will shut all those things down to free up capacity. So we do things in the back end to try and get as much capacity as possible for paying customers, but it's not quite guaranteed. But most customers will have a pre-production or regression or whatever you choose to call it, which is very often the same size as production, but quite likely doesn't have all the high availability features. So again, I've got a database server, I've got essential services, these aren't clustered. And I've got my 4 application servers. I could put them all in one zone or another, but if I put them across the 2 zones and I reserve the capacity, now I have got the benefit that if I lose zone 1, I can shut down those pre-prod application servers. I've got the capacity reserved, so nobody else can take it from me. Now, when I come to try and start these 2 VMs, I'm starting them within my subscription using my capacity reservation. So I'm now guaranteed to get the VM. So the great thing in this scenario is I know I'm going to get the capacity I need.
So just to highlight that, theoretically, what could have happened, since I have my pre-prod app service running in availability zone 2, but potentially if I do the failover, I need to shut down these 2 virtual machines. And what could happen now, if I don't have capacity reservation, that someone else grabs this capacity, so I cannot start them up anymore.
Yeah, you might be lucky. If you do it quickly, you might be successful, but equally, you might not. And that's the key is in that word guaranteed. And this customer was coming at it from very traditional on-prem data center thinking. They pay an amount of money for DR, and the hardware is there. They know it's there, and they were looking for that sort of same level of guarantee. So that's the kind of high availability scenario. But the other one, and again, using our kind of standard models, is a typical model is to say, for DR purposes, we do an async replication of a database level to the DR region. We use Azure Site Recovery to protect the ASCS. I notice I've got my arrows starting in the wrong place. Forgive me. And we probably use ASR to protect the application servers. And the way Azure Site Recovery works is what it essentially does is it actually replicates the disks to the DR region. There is no virtual machine sitting in the secondary region running. ASR will create the virtual machine on demand when you initiate a failover. So once again, primary region's just gone down. What's going to happen in my secondary region? All those people who are running ASR are going to be trying to start up virtual machines, and potentially even people who aren't running ASR may have some sort of manual process they go to, and they follow a run book and they try and repurpose or reprovision resources in another region, in the secondary region. So you're up against a whole bunch of people potentially trying to steal the same resources. So what we can do is I kind of protected myself over here. So I protected myself against zone failure by having pre-production over here. So now I'm going to really confuse matters. And I thought for a while about what's the simplest way to draw this. I couldn't think of one. So bear with me a little bit. So let's think of focus on the DR piece for a moment. So now instead of putting pre-production in the primary region, I put it in the secondary region. Once again, I can have these capacity guarantees on the application tier, on the central services, and in a disaster, I will need to shut these down. But once I've shut them down, I've got the capacity guaranteed. I know that ASR is going to work.
Okay.
Now, so right now, there's not actually any integration between ASR and capacity reservations. It's due to go into preview shortly, so it would be a little bit of a manual process at the moment. Okay. But we are moving towards making that a fully automated process.
So those VM types for the pre-prod and the prod in the secondary regions, do they need to be the same? VM size, VM numbers?
Ideally, yes. I mean, they could be a slightly different generation. You could, some customers will accept that they might, for example, 4 might be, if you like, spare capacity to guarantee performance and things. And you could, they might accept 3 in pre-production and 3 in a disaster. But in general terms, ideally, they're of the same size. Partly because ASR is going to be trying to start a particular VM type. So assuming they match, I've freed up, say, 4 D8s. I'm trying to start 4 D8s. I'm going to get a nice match. It's all going to work fine.
So basically also doing, I guess, reservation inside of course, one subscription, and then inside of one region or a zone. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the capacity reservation applies. I'm glad you asked that, because I can't remember actually. I think you control it at a subscription level, but
a subscription is never on the region. It's always on the subscription level.
Okay.
But why would it be on the region and not? Why would it be on a subscription and not?
Because you go across the regions or you go across the zones. Yeah, so you want to if you're zone 1, you want in that another zone, or you go across the region, you need another region. Who cares if I have it in the first region? If I go DR in the secondary region.
But thinking about it, it's got to be at a region level. But I will need to check. We can post a note.
Okay.
Nick, you mentioned something. Say that I saw Azure Site Recovery is not in does not actually understand the capacity reservation. What exactly that mean? What we need to have there in ISR to be somehow compatible with capacity reservation?
So I think it's largely a question of testing and validating that the whole thing works. But one of the things is with ASR, you can do pre and post scripts are wrapped around the creation of VM. So you could potentially create a pre-script that shuts down your pre-production. But I think they might be looking at making this a little bit more automated. So it happens.
Okay.
I haven't.
Okay, I get it.
I guess it's more about integration with the concept of capacity.
Yeah.
But how it works, basically, you need to shut down something which is not such a big priority in order to have the space for something else which is more priority. And you as a customer needs to decide what is important, more and what is less. Meaning, okay, a way, as Nick mentioned, is to have a pre-scripts, shut it down first. This one, do an ASR before you do ASR, and then to have enough capacity to start the stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
And I'm sure when it goes into preview, we will get some more documentation about what's actually included in that as a feature. But one little point I just wanted to point out is, clearly I've cheated a little bit because I've now put pre-production over in my DR region. So what am I going to do about my zonal HA? And the thing there is, as long as I've got some other virtual machines of roughly the right size and shape, which I will probably have something in Dev and QA, which I can repurpose. Once again, I can use capacity reservations against, maybe it's the Dev and QA application servers, so that, in the event of a zonal failure, I know I will be able to find, I'm guaranteed some capacity to be able to expand my production application servers. And it's a question of just juggling around the resources you've got. And maybe it encourages you to think about, making sure that you've got some aligned VM resources rather than just randomly choosing different sizes, sort of thing. It might encourage you to use, to try and standardize a little bit more around the size of these different VMs so that it's easier to repurpose them. The important thing is, in all of these, what you're doing is you're applying a capacity reservation to a virtual machine that you want anyway, and that you were planning to pay for. And then it's up to you whether that's pay-as-you-go, or it's up to the customer, it's pay-as-you-go, it's a 1 year or a 3 year reservation. And in most cases, it's probably going to be a 3 year reservation. But you're not really paying for anything that you're not using. You're just using those capacity reservations and applying them in the right places to try and guarantee the capacity for either an HA event or for a DR event.
So basically, there are no extra costs for guaranteeing something.
Exactly.
Okay.
The only scenario where you might get that, and I haven't actually drawn it here, is, some people talk about using a smaller virtual machine as the target for your database replication. In which case this might be, 50% or 25% of the size that you actually need, in which case I'd apply a capacity reservation to this beast as well, and again be able to repurpose that VM. And that doesn't matter whether it's sort of HANA, because in most cases for HANA you can get away with 50% sized virtual machine. Or for other databases you can probably go smaller. If it's just sort of something like SQL Server always on, you probably only need sort of 25% of the capacity at most. You might even get away with sort of 12.5. Bearing in mind all our VMs are multiples of 2. You've got to be 50, 25, 12.5 kind of thing. So there you would be having an extra VM, which is, or you're kind of getting away with a smaller virtual machine and repurposing it. But there are different sort of ways of doing this, but it's really about getting that word guaranteed.
Yeah.
For the capacity.
So Nick, this capacity reservation is also working with dedicating host virtual machine?
I don't know, actually. I don't think it is at the moment, because in the current state, there's a couple of things. Right now, it doesn't support M series.
Okay.
That's due before the end of the year.
Okay.
Because it's still in preview, but it does cover Ds and Es in all their many flavors. And I don't, certainly for documentation, I don't think mentions dedicated hosts. But again, logically, there's no reason I can see why it wouldn't support them.
Okay.
So you mentioned it's in preview, the feature, meaning private preview, public preview. What is the status?
It's now in public preview. It was private preview.
All right. That's encouraging as well. So we can put also some links there in addition. Yeah. Okay, great.
But I probably cannot use it in production yet. And I think that's the whole idea.
It's a public preview. Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's still.
Yeah, so realistically, because a lot of people are using obviously M series for production databases, be they HANA or just big SQL or Oracle or whatever databases, sort of the end of the year is probably going to be the time when we'll have the full SAP VM series covered.
But basically, it is a good time also with the public previews to start to play around.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think I'm working with a couple of customers who are at that planning stage. So they're just starting to deploy development systems into Azure. And so they're looking at this because they know they don't need production probably until sort of second quarter of next calendar year. So they've got time to evaluate and play with it, see how it all works, and then decide whether they build this into their plans.
Actually, how do I do that? Let's say I have already installed some virtual machines. Can I then just select the flag or whatever and say, look, I want to have this virtual machine or this size covered by capacity reservation, or do I need to start a virtual machine from scratch, delete it, and then set it up?
So you can apply a capacity reservation to an existing virtual machine.
Okay. Cool.
But still, meaning the admin guys needs to understand what is the runbook, what to stop, and basically to have enough capacity, what to start, right? So basically it implies also some kind of planning and defining the disaster recovery procedure, right?
It does. And, and as we know, in reality, customers don't tend to automate disaster recovery.
Yeah.
Because you want to have the controls. So most people will be developing runbooks, and a lot of the time you will have other things to do, like DNS changes to make potentially, or whatever. And so there will be a whole kind of runbook approach to instantiating disaster recovery and covering all the aspects that need to be done. I mean, as an interesting point, I was in a customer call probably a couple of months back with our own Microsoft internal systems people, and we are probably like most of our customers. Yes, we have DR in place. Our hope is never to use it. And in fact, the last time we had an outage which impacted our service, we actually deferred initiating DR because we knew the complexity of bringing up all the interlinked systems. It's not just SAP, it's everything that surrounds it. It takes a long time, and getting all the data synchronized, and the decision was taken to wait. And sure enough, shortly later, the system came back, and we just avoided it. And I think that's most customers want to have DR for the worst case scenario, but equally they want to try and avoid using it if they possibly can.
Holger, I can share the screen to answer your question. Just a second. So you see, in general, if you want to create, you create capacity reservation group. And there's also a question from you or Goran. You see, you are, of course, subscription and resource group standard, but you see, you need to define, name, but you need to decide the region. And you can select, you see, and you can select.
Exactly, makes sense.
Or just one,
or
not,
or not, which means that's non-zonal one then.
And then you are actually creating reservation. You see reservation name and VM size. Which one? How many instances, and go on and go on and go on.
Cool.
See?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense.
And he's
yeah.
calculating the costs and so on and so on. Okay, this is a very small one. Let's do something a little bit bigger. So, and so on and so on. And then you have actually that in reservation group. I never tried this. I just first time started it. So
I mean, one of the point is we refer to them in some of the documentation as on-demand capacity reservations, because unlike a reserved instance, which is a 1 or 3 year financial commitment,
okay,
you can actually do these on demand and just pay for them while you want them. So, it might be, and the only example I can think is you might be in an industry where you would take a risk most of the year, but if you're a retailer at Christmas, or you're looking at finance at year end, or whatever it might be, you might say, I'll take a bit of a risk on, particularly on that HA. Do I really need those VMs? Can I live with 50% application server capacity? Whether it's Christmas in your retailer, the answer is probably a big no. So you could take out short-term capacity reservations just to protect yourself during that period, and then you can switch them back off again.
Is this maybe a scenario is actually when customers starting to migrate into Azure, and there's a very critical steps there. So I want to be sure I will replicate maybe some other region or some, and then be sure just during the migration that I have my backup there. And when I'm done, when everything is running in my primary zone, then I will somehow polish that disaster recovery and maybe remove capacity reservation if I don't need it anymore. Yeah, it's very interesting actually.
But this makes sense also for the prod system, because typically you would maybe 1 in a quarter have explosion for a few days because they would run some bad jobs. Or Black Friday, maybe that's 1 per year. I don't know. But that's just a few days. But it's coming.
Maintenance windows and so on. When you need to restart your landscape.
Correct as well. Yeah, exactly. That's also a good point. But that's really useful because that this is coming. It's very for short time, but you know it will come. So why not just having ability to reserve just for a short period of time? It's great.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Rolando, because I'm working with a customer who's going to be doing that in a few months' time. They're doing a major migration into Azure, and they're actually doing a migration and also then an SLO deletion. It's a company separation, and so they will have about a 4-day window.
Sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar, yes, Goran, you know it well. But I hadn't thought of that. But over that weekend, they're using some quite big virtual machines, and we definitely don't want one to crash and then not be able to start it again.
Exactly. Yeah.
It never occurred to me. Actually, we should look at capacity reservations for that. I think it's like anything. It's early days. It's been a response. When I raised this back, as I say, early 2019, and started talking to engineering, it gradually came out that this wasn't the only customer asking for this sort of this capability. So it's taken a while to arrive, but I'm sure now we've got it. Now it's in preview. People will start using it and probably find more and more use cases for it. Other than the ones that the original demand came from.
Right.
Oh, that's really cool. And I think just to summarize, as you said, so it's all about the guarantee that I can really, with the capacity reservation, that I can really guarantee that my virtual machines are there, that I can start them, and whether it's for disaster recovery, like what we said in the beginning, or whether I know that I have a maintenance window, I know I will restart my virtual machine at some point in time, and I just want to be super sure that the capacity is there, and the virtual machine comes up again.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nick,
very,
I think
very
that
good topic, very important.
All of us, yes.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, because it's. Nick, we were working on that customer, and that was really super important topic, and it is because you need a capacity, you need a guarantee. You do a DR, you can't start. What the heck? Come on, guys. You have functionality, but I can't start.
Yeah. Yeah, as I say, it tends to be worse with the more specialized virtual machines, VMs particularly, because we don't have an infinite capacity for anything, but they are probably more constrained than a lot. Yeah. And if you're running a Windows virtual machine, you could probably run it on anything from an A to a B to a D to an F to an E, if all else fails. But we can't stick SAP workloads onto just any old virtual machine.
Yeah.
But when we're discussing about a scenario where the customer is using cross zone, yeah, so HR scenario, maybe light disaster recovery scenario in that way, and they are now also have disaster recovery landscape, yeah. So I mean, I don't think that many customers today already have that on premise, something like that. Maybe some big customers, but most of the customer does not have something like cross data centers which are in somewhere in the same region, 50 kilometers, and plus some data center which is in another continent or maybe far away. How many of those customers going in the direction, of course, for business perspective, this is no go, but how many of those customers say, I mean, what is the chance this complete region is done, is not there? Are there, my question is going, do you think that customer is somehow modifying expectations, say, hey, let's be real, yeah? Or they are just simply ignoring that and say, we want to have full power like on premise?
Well, I think, and Goran we'll know because I'm going to refer back to the same customer.
Yeah, that customer.
Yeah, but for them, what actually came out was the complexity of synchronizing data between different SAP applications, also but across their wider application portfolio, meant if they don't have synchronous replication between their primary and their DR, they have no idea how long it would take them to bring their business back online.
Okay.
So we went around every permutation, and what they've actually done is kind of what you're saying there, Robert. They've gone, actually, cross-zone HA is probably the only solution that really works, because we can do everything synchronously. So kind of last committed transaction, I would say there's still going to be scope for some messages floating around between applications to get lost, if not within SAP, certainly between SAP and non-SAP. But essentially, you're down to the last transaction probably missing. And the value of adding DR as well, they can't at the moment justify. The one thing we've nearly convinced them, but backup is still a topic of debate, is that you probably should have an offsite backup. In other words, the backup solution you have, and if you're using, and they are using infrastructure as code to build the landscape, make sure you've got all your code repositories, in GitHub or somewhere, and you've got a process which you maybe tested that says we could rebuild our systems in another region within 24, 48 hours. We could recover from backup within another 24, 48 hours, something, because very often when auditors come in and look at how you're running your business, they can take a dim view of a major global corporate that doesn't appear to have a very robust DR strategy. You want to make sure you can sit through that audit process and say with confidence, this is what we've done, this is how we thought about it. And we know
it's
we
a lot of
7 days.
It's a very much business question for the business, right? I mean, depends from customer to customer, maybe even the industry. So as Nick mentioned, for that customer, RPO equal to 0 is a must. So meaning any kind of DR defining you go across the continents, hundreds kilometers, will not work, because you need to be async, meaning RPO is potentially bigger than 0, period. But on the other hand, they also want as bigger as possible physical distance. And that's also interesting. Then basically you go for the zones and looking for the zones which are more far away, which have more bigger latency. Yes, that will influence some penalty on the performance, but still you can go with the RPO equal to 0. So that's all interesting, right? Depends from a customer.
That was my direction, because if you're discussing about RPO, RTO, in most cases customer have only one definition, but you cannot say that for HR, for DR you can have the same. It's not possible, because you have asynchronous between on the other side.
Correct.
So I think that in the cloud, probably customer hopefully think a little bit deeper. Okay, what is RPO in my business perspective? This is HR scenario, and what is the potential risk if I go in disaster recovery scenario? But I cannot have the same RPO because it's not possible. So this is somehow, I think, what customer will probably learn with cloud.
But I see also with this customer, they are having also kind of a little bit something similar on-premise, 2 data centers, more content. But still in Azure should be definitely, we expect generally improvement in a sense that across the zone will be more HA type. HA meaning automatical failover.
Yeah.
No layer which they don't have it on the on-premises. So it's more DR failover. DR meaning, okay, you stop it. It's take more longer time. You do manually this. You mean manual that. And here it's kind of more HA meaning more automatic, basically automatical, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So it will be definitely expected to be improvement for them in a context of business continuity. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly a really good question, because one of the things is, as you working with another customer who's looking at this from, they're looking at a system where they're potentially using 12 terabyte VMs for HANA, and they might well need to grow to 24 terabytes. And those things, they aren't cheap. And you start, it's simple to say, I'll have local HA, I'll have DRs to another region, then I've got my pre-production, and it gets quite expensive quite quickly. And, it's, what do I really need? And one of the things is back to that, the business, because we're challenging the customer, because they're saying, well, business is saying it's got to be fully HA, fully DR, but the nature of the system is, it's debatable to our mind that it really needs to be. It's advanced track and trace, which is largely required for legal compliance reasons, and there might be a potential that there may be a government or a government agency that will demand to see data from it. I don't think they're going to need the data in 5 minutes. We said to them, go away. What's the requirement? If you need to be able to provide data in, say, 72 hours after a request, how much HA and DR do you need? It's unlikely the VM is going to be down for 72 hours. If you have to be able to respond to requests in 5 minutes, then you're probably really worried about it. Be realistic about it. And it led to a conversation, and a customer, one of the first customers I worked on after joining Microsoft, as they moved to cloud, they actually decided to have 2 different kind of classifications of systems. Previously, on the on-prem world, everything had the same level of HA and DR. It was just kind of convenient. They just built everything to a standard design pattern, regardless really of whether it needed it. But as they looked to move to Azure, they said, actually, maybe we don't. Why would an internally facing enterprise portal, which primarily use for HR functions, need to be fully HA and DR? If it's down for half a day, for a day, does it matter? Our production ECC that runs our manufacturing part, that really matters to us. And so they went through this of looking at each of the SAP applications in turn and saying, we'll apply one of the 2 templates. So is it business critical? We'll build it to that level. If it's not business critical, we'll rely on things like VMs will restart, regions will come back. And be
because most of those requirements are coming from customer landscape on premise. I already have that hardware, so I will use it. Yeah.
Yes.
But now there's no option. If I stop everything and minimize everything, still I need to pay that hardware. Huh?
Yeah.
In cloud, you have this dynamic part of the story, and this is a part where a customer need to say, hey, maybe I can a little bit tweak it and save some money there. Yeah.
As you're talking about the cloud mindset.
Yes.
I mean, the point, on-premise, you would over-provision, meaning the DR. So just sit there and wait for the DR, which is wait. In cloud, it's not like this, but still, there are challenges. You need it, and you maybe if it's a questionable, can you get it? Then it's no way to go. But with this approach, you can still guarantee, and that's really great. And you have that granularity to choose also the times, which is awesome. I mean,
Okay, great.
Cool, Nick.
Good.
Okay.
I think with this, we'll let Goran celebrate his birthday. Continue this celebration. Nick, thank you very much for joining, for these very good insights. I think that was really helpful. And then I guess we'll see each other again sometime soon.
Week.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.